Hi there, today I'm going to be talking about fluency and why it is that anticipation is so important. Have you ever noticed how rhythm shapes not just music, but also the way that we speak and read and even think? This question has fascinated me for years, and as I explored recent research, I realised that our understanding of rhythm in Western culture is far too narrow. We often reduce it to simple beats and patterns, yet rhythm really is the invisible thread that connects movement, language, and even our sense of time. In Western traditions, rhythm is often treated as a technical skill, something to be counted or measured, but in many ancient and non-Western cultures, rhythm is understood as a living system, one that reflects the cycles of nature, the pulses of community, and the flow of emotion. When we strip rhythm of its context, we lose its richness and its power to connect us not only to music, but also to each other and our humanity as well. For schools, this misunderstanding of rhythm has real consequences. We often ask children to try harder, but the underlying timing system that supports fluency might not even yet be integrated. A narrow view of rhythm has also shaped the way that it's been studied scientifically, and this tends to ripple out into classrooms as well. Some empirical studies require children to chant and clap rhythmic patterns without any musical context at all. And from an educational perspective, for me, this really raises questions about how well such tasks can capture the complexity of rhythm for children. When we isolate rhythm from its musical or cultural environment, we really miss the very essence of what makes it meaningful, which of course is its capacity to create connection, anticipation, and flow. This same reductionist approach also appears in linguistic studies, where researchers apply the Western concept of musical rhythm to language. Natural speech doesn't follow these kinds of predictable patterns because it flows through syllables and phrases of varying lengths, and these are often shaped by emotion, intention, and context. When we listen to computer generated speech, we instantly sense its artificiality because the rhythm in the computer's kind of speech lacks the subtle irregularities that make human connection so characterful and vibrant. Neuroscience shows us that the brain is not a passive receiver of information, but an active predictor. In each moment, it generates expectations about timing and tone and meaning in language, and it also adjusts in real time as new information arrives. This is a wonderful reminder that our brains are adapting all the time to the environment that we perceive. Both music and language rely on rhythm as the basis for structure because you see, both of them are recursive. This means that the flow of one phrase, whether that's music or language, springs from the phrase that preceded it, meaning that the music or the language generate new linguistic or musical structures based on what already existed. And we can think of this as a relationship between what's given and what's new. And often the relationship between given and new creates logical sequences that unfold over time. And of course, this allows us to predict what's coming next. So, in simple terms, prediction is learned early as a kind of survival strategy. As infants, we must learn to predict what will happen next in our environment in the broadest terms. For example, we learn that the word cup or the word water are associated with maybe our mother at the kitchen sink, whereas the words book and story might be more associated with our father at bedtime. Our young lives become internal schema that are built on contextual cues of time, place, and person. And in conversations, the role of context sparks possibilities for the next phrase. And our minds are working with these so-called candidates. It's easy for us to enjoy a conversation when the dialogue is rich with so many potential avenues for discussion. And when we think of a cliffhanger at the end of a TV episode, this as well is an example of the power of context to spark speculative thinking, and the need to find out what happens next shows the power of predictive processing and its connections with the reward network in our brains. There's absolutely no doubt that our attention has been captured, because prediction does not operate in isolation. It really does depend on timing and reward. Now, we are all familiar with the sensation of nodding along as we listen to a person speaking, or realizing that our attention has been captured by something that we're starting to read. Entrainment is a very broad term that refers to a natural phenomenon. You may have seen video clips of metronomes that begin beating at different times, but soon become part of one larger field as they synchronize. This also applies to the movement patterns of animals and fish, insects and birds. Repeated actions tend to phase lock into the most sustainable and efficient pattern over time. The effect of entrainment adds a further dimension to this, because synchronizing with others makes the action that we're undertaking even more efficient and sustainable. And the fascinating aspect of all of this is that endless repetition actually implodes unless there's variation that is kind of introduced along the way. So this is why novelty and variety are experienced as reward and relief from the monotony of pure repetition. Entrainment is only sustainable in a coordinated activity such as working on an assembly line, when a degree of variety is also part of the experience. Music was introduced into factories to provide an external timekeeper, as well as to introduce some contextual variety. I will never forget how excited I felt 25 years ago when I was writing my MA dissertation and reading about the timing of a musical phrase, a spoken phrase, and a physical gesture, and that they would all fall within the same predictable time window, averaging at about 5 seconds in duration. I was thrilled by the elegance of this idea, and also to discover later in that same paper that the period of time elapsing between the secretion of dopamine by the basal ganglia corresponded with the same time window. This was when I learned that the regular pulsing of dopamine framed our subjective experience in the present moment. So how about you? Do you feel that your perceptual time window of the present moment is approximately 5 seconds long? The article moved on to demonstrate the existence of a temporal time window in different mammals, and in my view very persuasively, because there is variability between the species. So if we go back to the humans, what is interesting is that when we focus our attention on a task, time can either drag or it can fly. And if we are engrossed, our sense of the temporal window of the present dilates. It is even possible to enter a flow state in which there is very little sense of time passing at all. When children are not able to let their reading flow, they experience reading as many short disconnected units of time, as if juddering or stalling rather than flowing. And in my view, this can be supported and stabilized using rhythm within a high quality musical context. In a recent study, researchers were able to demonstrate that delta band entrainment takes place in the early stage of processing by the auditory cortex. The delta band frequency is relatively slow, and the researchers showed that this frequency synchronized with prosody. More recently, another study showed that the delta band frequency of entrainment carried the contextual element of prosody into the future and enhanced the predictive aspect of sound perception at the very early stage of auditory processing. So this finding mirrors the role of the delta band frequency of band entrainment. So this finding mirrors the role of delta band entrainment in the predictive quality of perception of tones. And researchers discovered this actually in about 2015, so 10 years ago. And in practice, the prosodic qualities of speech are tonal, in the sense that there is intonation in the shape of the utterance, and also in terms of the expressive qualities of what is said. And the expressive aspect of prosody is also an indicator of deeper engagement. The authors of the research showed that the brain areas in the left hemisphere associated with prediction were activated during entrainment of delta band frequencies in the auditory cortex of the right hemisphere of the human brain, underscoring the importance of deeper rhythmic structures in language processing, whether in dialogue or in reading. In answering the question, why does fluency depend on anticipation and not only decoding? It's simply because fluent reading and speech are not only about recognizing symbols or sounds. The processes are more about predicting what comes next than we might realize. Our brains are constantly forecasting patterns of rhythm, syntax, and meaning, and this is why anticipation is required when we create a feeling of flow, a consequence of stable timing. Decoding, on the other hand, is the absence of flow because it loses its context and just becomes a string of steps that never truly cohere. Rhythm and prediction allow the brain to entrain to the flow of language, so comprehension and expression can become effortless. This understanding has profound implications for how we teach fluency. Traditional methods tend to focus on accuracy and repetition, and this trains learners to process language as a sequence of units. But if fluency depends on rhythmic prediction, then teaching should focus on helping all children to feel the timing and the flow of language. Activities that emphasize rhythm, movement, and prosody can help to activate the brain's predictive timing networks, making reading and speaking more natural and more connected. In this way, fluency becomes more about experiencing the living pulse of individual expression. By bringing rhythm back to the heart of learning, we value timing, effect, and expression as much as accuracy. In doing this, we move beyond fluency as performance and towards fluency as comprehension and engagement. Reading is a social act of synchrony between the author and the reader. And rhythm teaches us that meaning is not something we construct alone, but something that we can actually create together in time with the author. From an instructional perspective, this suggests that fluency difficulties are not always a matter of insufficient practice or decoding, but much more, it's about unstable timing and prediction. So interventions that strengthen rhythmic and prosodic sensitivity may therefore support reading fluency indirectly by restoring the flow rather than increasing the effort. Thank you so much for listening, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye.